guys, it's Jessii Vee, and today's Halloween shirt says the big book of ghost hunting with a cute little ghost on it. I have way too many Halloween shirts. I need to give some away. But if you guys want a Halloween shirt that I designed, don't forget we do have the new That's So Creepy shirts. One is in this cool purple and one is in this dark gray, and they're only available for Halloween, and I've linked them down below. So as you can tell by the title of today's video, we're gonna be talking about very creepy corn mazes. So I really wanted to talk about the history of mazes in general because that whole topic is so intriguing to me. The history is very, very strange. And then we're gonna be talking about this one specific corn maze that you should never ever go to. And you'll hear why in a second. So without further ado, we're gonna jump right into this video and talk about some maze history. Mazes can be made out of hedges, corn, wood, or mirrors, and they can incite feelings of panic, excitement, or serenity. Now, mazes have been a part of our culture for thousands of years, and some people wonder why. The first mazes that were ever created were actually called labyrinths, and they had a single winding path not meant to confuse or puzzle anyone that was walking through it. So the very first labyrinths that were ever invented had no dead ends, had no deceiving paths, it was just one path. There was only one way you could go. And one of the most famous labyrinths is called the Cretan Labyrinth, which housed the terrifying Minotaur at its center. And if you don't know what a Minotaur is, it's basically this mythical creature that was portrayed in classical times as having a head and tail of a bull and the body of a man. So imagine running into this creature while you're walking through a maze. For some reason, back in those times, they would always have one in the center of their maze. Now, obviously these creatures weren't real, but they would either have like statues or they would show it in paintings as being in the center of a maze. Now, there was this very weird tradition in Germany where when boys were approaching adulthood, they would have to go through a maze. And that was kind of like their change from being a boy to a man. During the Middle Ages, as kings and queens built up elaborate gardens, they would often include some sort of hedge maze as a diversion for themselves and guests. And since they did that, hedge mazes have become a very popular thing. In 1690, the oldest surviving hedge maze was created in the Hampton Court Maze in Greater London. And this maze still exists to this day since the 1600s. The hedges used in the creation of mazes are taller than most visitors who dare enter. Now, the word maze actually dates back to the 13th century, and it's derived from the word delirium. Now, obviously delirium means like confused, you feel sort of out of place and weird, and that's how you're supposed to feel when you're in a maze. Now, I don't know about you guys, but whenever I think of a hedge maze, I instantly think of Harry Potter. That part of the movie actually scared me so much as the kid, and honestly, in my opinion, I think that's the scariest part of the whole entire series. And then when I think of the word labyrinth, I think of the David Bowie movie. I know every single song in that movie by heart. I love that movie. Now let's specifically talk about when corn mazes were first invented. The history of mazes in cornfields goes back to 1993. The first corn maze was built in the United States at Lebanon Valley College in Pennsylvania. Now, this very first corn maze was only about 3 acres wide, and it had about 1.92 miles of path. And since then, corn mazes have been a tradition all over the world, especially around fall season. Now, for some reason, I thought corn mazes have been around since like the early 1900s, but the first one was only created in the 90s? What? Now, I wanted to tell you guys today about this very, very creepy corn maze. Now, this is probably just a creepypasta, I would assume, but it's still terrifying. This story is called The Corn Maze That Kept Changing. Now, this story was actually written in the perspective of a cop. He was new to his job and he was working in this small rural town in Pennsylvania. And one day he got dispatched to a very unexplained call. Since he lived in a rural town, they had plenty of corn mazes, haunted houses, and hay rides that time of year in the fall. And after October 31st, farmers began to clear out their cornfields. And usually when farmers start clearing out their cornfields for winter, they will find interesting lost items that people had dropped while they were in the maze. You know, they find things like hats, bags, jewelry, scarves, mitts, all kinds of just random things that people would have. So it's very common for farmers to just find missing items. And usually when farmers find these things, they wouldn't call the police. They would either throw them out or have like a lost and found bin. Well, one day this police department got this very strange call from a farmer who said he had found something something very horrible while cleaning out his cornfield. So basically, this new cop was dispatched to go and investigate. When he got there, he walked into the cornfield with the farmer, and as they were walking, he asked the farmer what he had found. And the man replied to this cop saying,
"Oh, I found a skeleton."
The farmer said that at first he thought that maybe it was just like a Halloween decoration, maybe it was fake, but when he got closer, he realized that this skeleton was definitely human. Now, the cop was skeptical at first until the farmer brought him to the exact spot where he found it in the corn maze. They both looked down at this shallow like hole in the ground that had this skeleton inside of it. So because the officer saw this, he told the farmer to go back to his house while he called for backup, because obviously they didn't want the farmer involved in like tampering with evidence. So before the farmer walked back to the farmhouse, he told the cop,
"I'm sure my wife is waiting on the front porch for my return. We're gonna have some breakfast and you can come grab me if you need anything."
So this officer was just standing over the skeleton and took out his phone to call for backup. But he realized he didn't have any service, so he decided to walk back to the farmhouse to call from this farmer's phone. Right as he was about to walk back, he felt someone grab his shoulder. So he spun around expecting to see that the farmer was still there, but when he turned, there was no one there. A sudden rush of chills went down his spine and he turned back to continue towards the farmhouse. But to his surprise, he was face to face with corn stalks that hadn't been there before, and they were nearly 8 feet tall. So he spun around, and all around him were these corn stalks right in front of him. And he could no longer see the farmhouse, which was so weird because they hadn't walked very far into the maze, and the farmhouse was definitely still in sight. But suddenly it was like the corn maze had changed and was all around him. Almost half hour passed of him trying to find his way out of the cornfield, but he kept finding dead ends. And every time he turned around to look back at the path he had just walked down, it was suddenly gone. So he knew the cornfield was changing almost every second, and he was losing track of time of how long he had been in there. So he stopped to catch his breath, and his heart almost stopped when he looked down at the ground to see the same skeleton lying in the shallow grave. So clearly he was right back where he started, which was so frustrating because he felt like he was walking for almost an hour. So he sat on the ground completely frustrated, put his head in his hands, but when he looked up again, he saw the farmhouse in the distance. He walked right up to the farmhouse, and the farmer was standing on his porch, and the farmer asked him,
"Officer, did you manage to call for backup?"
So he told the farmer how embarrassed he was because it took him so long to just get out of the cornfield. He said he didn't mean to be gone for over an hour, but the farmer just shook his head and smiled and responded,
"I only left you about a minute ago. I don't know why you would be embarrassed about that."
And that's how the story ended. So I was reading a lot of people's comments. They were saying that the farmer sounds really sketchy, like it sounds like he sort of knows what goes on in the cornfield. And I guess that skeleton was there because it was a previous person who could not escape the cornfield maybe. This almost reminds me of that movie In the Tall Grass. If you guys have seen that movie, you'll kind of see the similarities. But yeah, I definitely thought it was kind of an interesting story, and especially around this time of year with corn mazes. I don't know if I want to go on one after this. Anyway, so guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget, if you want to win this backdrop behind me, all you have to do is go over to my TikTok account and give it a follow. It's called Official Jessii Vee. And if you would like a That's So Creepy shirt, we have one in purple and one in gray, and I will link them down below in the description. But I hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!